The rejection happened in silence. Isolde stood at the foot of the obsidian throne, her wedding gown, if it could be called that, hanging loose on her frame like a burial shroud. Around her, the vampire court watched with eyes that gleamed like cut glass in the torchlight. None spoke. None moved. They simply waited for their king to dismiss her as he had dismissed every other bride brought before him in the last century. King Lysander did not even look at her. He sat carved from shadow and stone, one pale hand resting against his jaw, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the vaulted ceiling of his hall. His beauty was the kind that made mortals weep, sharp-boned and inhuman, with black hair that fell past his shoulders and eyes the color of winter frost. But there was no warmth in that beauty, no recognition. He looked through her as though she were smoke. "Leave," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The word echoed through the chamber like a death knell. Isolde's hands trembled within the threadbare silk of her sleeves. She had expected this. Her father had warned her, screamed at her actually, that she would be sent back in disgrace, that a girl with her shame, her scandal, her ruined name could never be accepted by the vampire king. But her village had no choice. The treaty demanded a bride every decade, and there were no suitable girls left. Only Isolde, only the merchant's daughter who had been accused of theft, whose engagement had been broken, whose family had been bankrupted by lies she could never disprove. She was the offering no one wanted to give, sent to a king who wanted nothing at all. "My lord?" the elder vampire beside the throne murmured, his voice like wind through a crypt. "The treaty is fulfilled by the offering, not the acceptance." Lysander's fingers curled slowly against the armrest. "She has been presented. She has been rejected. Send her back." Isolde felt the words like a physical blow. Rejected. Again. Always. But as she turned to leave, something shifted in the air, a change so subtle she almost missed it. The torches flickered, the temperature dropped, and for just a moment she felt the weight of the king's gaze actually land on her. Her feet stopped. She didn't know why, didn't know what possessed her to turn back, to lift her eyes to that terrible, beautiful face. But when she did, she found him staring at her with an expression she couldn't name. Not quite shock, not quite recognition. Something older, something that looked almost like pain. His nostrils flared once, very slightly, then his eyes widened just a fraction, just enough, and his hand tightened on the throne until the ancient wood groaned beneath his grip. "What is your name?" His voice had changed. It was no longer distant. It was sharp now, focused, with an edge that made every vampire in the room go utterly still. "Isolde," she whispered. "Isolde Thorn. Your bloodline." I don't know, my lord. My father is a merchant. My mother died when I was young." Something flickered across his face, hunger, fury, recognition, she couldn't tell. He rose from his throne in one fluid motion, and suddenly he was descending the steps toward her with a grace that should have been impossible for something so large, so powerful. The court parted before him like water. Isolde's instinct screamed at her to run, but her body refused to obey. She stood frozen as he approached, as he stopped just beyond arm's reach, towering over her in the gloom. He was so close now she could see the faint silver veins beneath his marble skin, could smell something like frost and ancient parchment and blood. "Who accused you?" he asked softly. The question was so unexpected that Isolde blinked. "My lord? You bear the mark of shame. I can smell it on you, the fear, the injustice. Someone accused you of something you did not do." His eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Who?" "The magistrate's son," she heard herself say. He wanted me to marry him. When I refused, he said I had stolen from his father's estate. They found the jewels in my room. I don't know how they got there." Lysander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And your family believed him?" It wasn't a question. Somehow he already knew. "They had no choice," Isolde whispered. "His word against mine. His family's power against our ruin." For a long moment, the king said nothing. He simply stood there, staring at her with those frost-pale eyes, and Isolde had the strangest sensation that he was looking not at her face, but into her through skin and bone and blood, down to something deeper, something he recognized. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible, and it seemed to cost him something to form the words. "You will stay." The court erupted in whispers, low, hissing sounds that echoed off the stone. Isolde's heart lurched. "My lord, I don't understand." "You will stay," he repeated. And this time, there was no room for argument. His gaze never left hers. "You will be given chambers in the East Wing. You will not be harmed, you will not be sent back." But the rejection was premature. He turned away from her sharply, as though looking at her too long caused him physical pain. "Take her to the Rose Tower. See that she has everything she requires." Two female vampires materialized at Isolde's sides, their hands cool and firm on her elbows. They began to guide her away, but she couldn't stop herself from looking back. Lysander had returned to his throne, but he wasn't sitting. He stood beside it, one hand gripping the back of the seat, his entire body rigid. And though his face was turned away, she could see the tension in every line of him, the coiled violence, the restraint, as if he were holding himself back from something he desperately wanted or desperately feared. The Rose Tower was beautiful in the way a mausoleum was beautiful. Isolde stood at the window of her chamber, watching moonlight spill across the vampire kingdom like liquid silver. Below, the palace gardens stretched in geometric perfection, hedges carved into impossible shapes, fountains that ran with water so clear it looked like glass, roses that bloomed black and blood-red in the eternal night. It had been 3 days since the king had ordered her to stay, and she had not seen him once. The female vampires who attended her, Seraphin and Mira, were courteous but distant. They brought her meals she barely touched. They dressed her in gowns of deep emerald and midnight blue, far finer than anything she'd ever owned. They answered her questions with careful politeness and volunteered nothing. "Why am I here?" Isolde had asked on the second night. Seraphine's amber eyes had flickered with something that might have been pity. "The king has his reasons." "What reasons?" "We do not question our lord." It was the same answer every time. Now, alone in her tower chamber, Isolde felt the weight of the silence pressing down on her like a physical thing. She was fed, clothed, protected, and utterly, completely ignored. The king who had insisted she stay had made no effort to see her, speak to her, or explain why he'd reversed his rejection so suddenly. She was trapped in a gilded cage, and she didn't understand why. A soft knock at the door made her turn. "Enter," she called, expecting Seraphine with the evening meal. Instead, an older vampire stepped inside, the same elder who had stood beside the throne during her presentation. He was tall and thin, with silver hair and eyes like polished obsidian. His presence filled the room with an authority that made Isolde instinctively step back. "Lady Isolde," he said, inclining his head with a respect that felt almost mocking. "I am Thaddeus, the king's chancellor. I trust you have been made comfortable?" "I have been made confused," Isolde said before she could stop herself. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I imagine so. The king's behavior has been unusual. Then perhaps you can explain it to me. Why did he reject me, then change his mind? Why am I being kept here if he has no intention of—" She stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Of marrying me? Of acknowledging me? Of acknowledging me? Of even looking at me?" Thaddeus moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment, he simply gazed out at the gardens below. "Our king," he said finally, "has not taken a bride in over 200 years. Every offering the treaty has brought him, he has rejected within moments. He cannot bear to be near them, cannot tolerate their presence, and we have never understood why." Isolde's throat tightened, "And yet he kept me." "Yes." Thaddeus turned to face her, and there was something calculating in his expression now. "He kept you. And more than that, he recognized you." "Recognized, but we've never met. Not you specifically, girl. Your blood, The word hung in the air between them like a blade. "I don't understand," Isolde whispered. Thaddeus studied her for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "Do you know what you are, child? A merchant's daughter. A ruined woman. Nothing. You are mistaken." He took a step closer, and despite herself, Isolde felt a chill run down her spine. When a vampire reaches a certain age, certain power, their senses become acute. They can smell lies, fear, blood, of course, but more than that, they can smell lineage, heritage, the echo of ancient blood that runs in mortal veins. Isolde's hands clenched in her skirts. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that when you entered that throne room, the king scented something in you that he has not encountered in centuries, something that made him lose his legendary control, something that made him desperate enough to keep you here, even though being near you clearly causes him pain. What could possibly—" "I don't know." For the first time, Thaddeus sounded genuinely frustrated. He won't speak of it, won't explain. He's locked himself in the northern wing and refuses to see anyone, even his most trusted advisors. "All I know is that you have awakened something in him that he has kept buried for a very, very long time." Isolde felt her pulse hammering in her throat. "Then what am I supposed to do?" "Wait," Thaddeus said simply. "He will come to you eventually. He won't be able to help himself. Whatever you are, whatever you represent, it's pulling at him like a tide. And Lysander has never been one to resist a tide for long, no matter how much it might destroy him." He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. "One more thing, Lady Isolde. When he does come to you, and he will, do not ask him about his past. Do not ask him about the curse, or the other brides, or why he's been alone for so long. If you value your life, you will let him reveal what he wishes, when he wishes. And if I don't?" Thaddeus's smile was cold. "Then you'll discover why even the eldest vampires fear him." The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Isolde alone with the moonlight and the terrible, suffocating silence. She moved back to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Below, something moved in the gardens, a shadow darker than the others, swift and impossibly graceful. It paused beneath an ancient oak, and though the distance was too great for mortal eyes, Isolde could have sworn she felt the weight of someone's gaze upon her. Watching, waiting, hungry. Then the shadow was gone, and she was left wondering if she'd imagined it. But deep in her chest, in the space between her heartbeats, she felt something shift. A pull, a recognition that mirrored what Thaddeus had described, as if some part of her already knew what she was, and what was coming. He couldn't stop coming to the gardens. Lysander stood beneath the ancient oak, hidden by shadows and the supernatural stillness that came as naturally to him as breathing once had. Above, in the rose tower, he could see her silhouette against the window, small, fragile, utterly mortal. Utterly impossible. He had tried to stay away. For 3 days and 3 nights he had locked himself in his private chambers, refusing to eat, refusing to see anyone, doing everything in his power to suppress the hunger that had awakened the moment she'd stepped into his throne room. It hadn't worked. Every hour the pull grew stronger. Every moment he found himself drawn back to this spot, to these gardens, to the base of her tower where he could watch her shadow and torture himself with proximity. She smelled like her. Not exactly the scent was similar but distinct, like a melody played in a different key. But it was close enough to tear open wounds he'd thought sealed centuries ago, close enough to make his carefully constructed control crack at the edges. Ilara. The name was a knife in his chest even now, after all this time. Lysander closed his eyes, forcing himself to breathe the habit left over from mortality. Unnecessary now, but grounding. He could still remember her face, still remember the way she'd looked at him with those dark eyes full of trust and love and terrible, beautiful mortality. Still remembered the exact moment he'd killed her. A sound from above made him look up. Isolde had opened her window, leaning out into the cool night air. Her dark hair spilled over one shoulder, and in the moonlight she looked almost translucent, ethereal, like she might disappear if he stopped watching. like Alara had disappeared. His fangs ached. "I know you're there." Her voice drifted down through the darkness, soft but steady. Lysander went utterly still, every predatory instinct screaming at him to vanish, to maintain the distance he'd been desperately trying to preserve. But he didn't move. "I felt you watching for the past 2 nights," Isolde continued. She wasn't looking down at him, wasn't looking anywhere in particular. "I don't know if you're the king or one of his guards, but whoever you are, I wish you'd just speak to me. This silence is worse than any rejection." Something in her voice, the loneliness, the exhaustion, the echo of abandonment, made the decision for him. Lysander stepped out of the shadows. He heard her breath catch as she finally saw him, standing in the pool of moonlight at the base of her tower. He didn't move closer. Didn't speak. Simply let her look at him. Let her see the monster who had kept her caged here, without explanation. "Your Majesty," she whispered. "You should close your window," he said. His voice came out rougher than he'd intended. "The night is cold." "I don't mind the cold." She leaned further over the sill, and Lysander's hands clenched at his sides as he fought the urge to move to position himself, to catch her if she fell, or to climb the tower wall and pull her back to safety. Both impulses were dangerous, both required touching her. He couldn't touch her. "Why did you keep me here?" Isolde asked. "I told you." The rejection was premature. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you." She was quiet for a moment, studying him with an intensity that made him deeply uncomfortable. He was used to being feared, revered, avoided. He was not used to being seen, truly seen by mortal eyes. "Chancellor Thaddeus said I have unusual blood," she said finally, "that you recognize something in me." Lysander's jaw tightened. He would have words with Thaddeus later. Many, many words. The Chancellor speaks out of turn. Does he speak falsely? That's not the same thing. "Then tell me the truth." There was steel in her voice now, a strength that surprised him. "Tell me why you can't even look at me for more than a moment. Tell me why you keep me prisoner in this tower but won't come near me. Tell me what I am to you. You're nothing to me." The lie tasted like ash. "You're a treaty obligation, a political necessity, nothing more. I don't believe you." Her audacity should have angered him. Instead, it made something twist painfully in his chest. "Believe what you wish," he said coldly. "It changes nothing." He turned to leave, to retreat back into the shadows where he belonged. But her voice stopped him. "I'm not her, you know." Lysander froze, turned back slowly. "What did you say?" "Whoever she was, whoever I remind you of, I'm not her." Isolde's eyes were bright in the moonlight, fierce despite the tears gathering there. "I don't know what happened between you. I don't know why my blood smells familiar to you. But I know what it's like to be punished for someone else's sins, to be rejected for crimes you didn't commit, to be seen as a ghost instead of a person." His breath unnecessary, automatic, stopped completely. "Don't do that to me," she whispered. "Don't keep me here and refuse to see me. Don't make me a replacement for someone I'll never be. Either let me go or acknowledge that I'm here, that I'm real, that I'm Isolde, not whoever you lost." The words hit him like a physical blow, because she was right. She was absolutely, devastatingly right. He had been treating her as a ghost, as an echo, as a second chance he didn't deserve and couldn't allow himself to take. But she wasn't Alara. She was her own person, fierce and damaged and trapped by his inability to let go of the past. "I'm sorry," he heard himself say. The words felt foreign on his tongue. He couldn't remember the last time he'd apologized to anyone. "You're right. You deserve better than this." "Then give me better," Isolde said quietly. "Start by telling me your name, your real name, not just your title." Lysander stared up at her, at this girl who had somehow managed to see through 2 centuries of carefully constructed walls in the span of a few moments. "Lysander," he said finally. "My name is Lysander Thorn." "Thorn?" Her eyes widened. "But that's your family name." "Yes, He saw the moment comprehension dawned on her face. "We need to talk, Isolde, but not like this. Not with you caged in that tower like a prisoner." He moved then, faster than mortal eyes could track, scaling the tower wall with inhuman grace until he stood on her windowsill close enough to touch. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Close enough that he could smell the blood singing beneath her skin. "Tomorrow night," he said softly, "I'll tell you everything. The truth about your bloodline, the curse that binds me, and why, after 200 years of refusing every bride, I cannot bring myself to let you go." Then he was gone, dropping back into the darkness below, leaving Isolde trembling in the window frame with 1,000 questions and the ghost of his presence still lingering in the air. Isolde didn't sleep. She spent the entire night pacing her chamber, her mind spinning with possibilities. Thorn. He'd said his name was Thorn, the same as hers. The name her father had always claimed came from her mother's merchant family. But what if it wasn't just a merchant name? What if there was something older, something deeper in her blood? When dawn came, or what passed for dawn in this realm of eternal twilight, Seraphine arrived with breakfast and a summons. "The king requests your presence in the library," the vampire said, her amber eyes unreadable. "He'll answer your questions there." The library was in the oldest part of the palace, down corridors lined with portraits of long-dead nobles and through doors that groaned on ancient hinges. It was a cavernous space, all soaring ceilings and endless shelves, lit by hundreds of candles that cast dancing shadows across leather-bound volumes. Lysander stood at the far end, his back to her, one hand resting on a pedestal that held an enormous book bound in black leather. "Close the door," he said without turning. Isolde obeyed, her heart hammering. Alone. She was alone with him, truly alone, for the first time since that night in the throne room. 237 years ago, Lysander began, his voice low and controlled. "I fell in love with a mortal woman. Her name was Alara Thorn." Isolde's breath caught. She was a scholar's daughter. Brilliant, curious, fearless. "She came to my court as part of a diplomatic delegation, and I—" He paused, his hand tightening on the pedestal. "I had been king for centuries by then. I had seen empires rise and fall. I thought I understood what it meant to be immortal, to be separate from the mortal world, but Alara taught me I knew nothing at all." He finally turned to face her, and Isolde was struck by the raw pain in his eyes. "We married in secret. My court would never have accepted a mortal queen, and I was arrogant enough to believe I could protect her, that I could give her a long life, decades of happiness before mortality claimed her." His laugh was bitter. "I was a fool." "What happened?" Isolde whispered. "The blood bond." He gestured to the book on the pedestal. "When a vampire of sufficient age forms a deep emotional connection with a mortal, something changes in the blood. It calls to us. The mortal's scent becomes intoxicating, overwhelming. Every instinct we have demands we feed, we claim, we make them ours in the most primal way possible." Isolde's hands trembled. "You fed from her. I tried not to." The words came out strangled. "For 3 years I resisted. I kept my distance when the hunger grew too strong. I thought I was strong enough to control it, but one night she was injured a fall, nothing serious, but she was bleeding. And He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "The bond makes it nearly impossible to stop," he continued, his voice hollow. "When a vampire drinks from someone they love, someone whose blood sings to them, it's like drowning in ecstasy. Every instinct says take more, until there's nothing left. I managed to pull away, but barely. And the damage was done. She died? Worse? The blood bond, once activated, becomes a curse. She began to fade. The vampire's bite doesn't just take blood, it takes life force, vitality, the very essence of what makes a mortal alive. Over the next month, I watched her waste away, watched her become a shadow of herself, and there was nothing I could do. No magic, no remedy could break the bond once it formed." Tears burned in Isolde's eyes. "I'm so sorry." She begged me to turn her, Lysander said softly. To make her like me, so we could be together forever. But I couldn't. The transformation only works for those with strong constitution, strong will. She was already too weak. The attempt would have killed her immediately. He closed his eyes. So I held her as she died, and I swore I would never let it happen again. The rejected brides, Isolde breathed. You've been protecting them. From myself. Yes. He opened his eyes, and the anguish there was devastating. Every decade the treaty brings a new offering, and every decade I reject them immediately. Because if I let myself feel anything, if I let myself care even a fraction of what I felt for Alara, the curse will activate again, and I will kill another innocent woman. The silence stretched between them, heavy with grief and understanding. Then why keep me? Isolde finally asked. If being near me is dangerous. Because your blood isn't just similar to Alara's. Lysander moved toward her slowly, carefully, keeping a careful distance. It's identical, not in scent, but in essence, in lineage. Alara had a younger sister, Anna, who survived her. Anna married, had children. The bloodline continued. You, Isolde, are Alara's direct descendant. The world tilted. That's impossible, Isolde whispered. My mother was a merchant's daughter. Your mother was Anna Thorne's great-great-granddaughter. The family fell on hard times, lost their estate, scattered, but the blood remained true. He stopped just beyond arm's reach. When you walked into that throne room, I didn't just send Alara. I scented her family, her line, the one thing I have left of the woman I loved. So I'm what? A remnant? A memorial? No. His voice was fierce suddenly. You're a temptation, a test. Everything I've built, every wall I've erected to keep myself from forming that bond again. It all crumbled the moment I saw you, because part of me, the part that's still human enough to be foolish, wants to believe this is a second chance, that fate brought you here for a reason, and the other part knows that second chances don't exist, that I'll kill you just as surely as I killed her. Isolde's hands clenched in her skirts. She should be terrified, should be demanding he send her away immediately, but instead she found herself asking, what if you didn't? What? What if there was a way to break the curse, to form a bond that didn't end in death? Lysander stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. I've spent 2 centuries searching. There is no way. Have you searched with someone who carries Alara's blood? Isolde took a step forward, ignoring the way his entire body tensed. What if that's why I'm here? What if my bloodline is the key? Isolde, don't. But she was already moving toward the pedestal, toward the ancient book he'd been touching. What is this? The Codex Sanguis, the original vampire law tome. But there's nothing in it about, then let's look. She reached for the book, her fingers brushing the leather cover. The moment she touched it, pain exploded through her hand. She cried out, jerking back, but it was too late. Blood welled from a thin slice across her palm. The book's edge had been razor-sharp, enchanted to test bloodlines. And in the enclosed space of the library, the scent hit Lysander like a tidal wave. His eyes went black, his fangs extended. And Isolde realized she'd just made a terrible, terrible mistake. Get out. Lysander's voice was barely human. He stood rigid, every muscle locked. His hands curled into fists, so tight his nails drew blood from his own palms. The black in his eyes had spread, consuming the frost-pale irises entirely. And Isolde could see his fangs fully extended longer, sharper than she'd imagined possible. I said get out. The second command came out as a roar that shook the candle flames. But Isolde didn't move, couldn't move. She stood frozen, clutching her bleeding hand to her chest, watching the war that raged across his features, hunger and horror, desire and desperation. I won't hurt you, she heard herself say. You don't understand. He took a step back, then another, putting distance between them. Your blood, Alara's blood, I can taste it in the air, and it's God, it's exactly the same. Then take it. The words were out before she could stop them. Lysander's head snapped up. What did you say? You need to know. Isolde's voice shook, but she forced herself to stay still. You need to know if the bond forms. If I'm the same as her, or different enough that maybe, no. The word was absolute. Final. I won't risk it. You're risking it anyway by keeping me here. She took a step toward him, ignoring every instinct screaming at her to run. Every day I stay, the pull grows stronger. Thaddeus told me. You told me. How long before you lose control entirely? How long before you come to me in the night without meaning to? His expression was anguished. I won't let that happen. You can't stop it, not forever. Another step. But here, now, you're prepared. You're aware. If the bond starts to form, you'll feel it. You'll be able to pull away before it's too late. You don't know what you're asking. I'm asking you to try, Isolde whispered. I'm asking you to see if maybe, just maybe, 200 years was enough time for the curse to weaken, for my bloodline to evolve, for something to change. She held out her bleeding hand between them. Lysander stared at it like it was a loaded weapon. If I'm wrong, if the bond forms and I can't stop, then I'll die knowing I tried to help you, that I gave you a chance to be free of this guilt you've carried for centuries. Her eyes met his, steady despite her fear. Isn't that worth the risk? For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't breathe. The entire library seemed to hold its breath with him. Then, with the slow deliberation of a man approaching his own execution, Lysander closed the distance between them. He took her hand in both of his, skin cold as marble, his grip achingly gentle. The contrast between his inhuman strength and the tenderness of his touch made something in Isolde's chest constrict. If this goes wrong, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I need you to know I'm sorry. For all of it, for keeping you here, for putting you in danger, for being too selfish to let you go when I should have. Don't apologize yet, Isolde managed. You might not have anything to apologize for. His lips twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. Then, maintaining eye contact, he lifted her palm to his mouth. The first touch of his tongue against her wound was electric. Isolde gasped, her knees going weak, but Lysander's other hand came up to steady her, holding her upright as he began to drink. His eyes fluttered closed, his expression transforming into something between ecstasy and agony. For several heartbeats, neither of them moved. The only sound was Isolde's ragged breathing and the soft, almost imperceptible sound of Lysander drinking from her palm. Then his eyes snapped open. They were still black, still fully dilated with hunger. But there was something else there now, surprise. Wonder, confusion. He pulled back, releasing her hand, staring at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. What? Isolde whispered. What is it? Your blood. His voice was hoarse. It tastes like hers, but different. There's something else in it. Something I've never... He stopped abruptly, his eyes widening further. The book, he breathed. The codex. Your blood activated something. Isolde turned to look. The ancient tome on the pedestal was glowing now, faint golden light seeping from between its pages. As they watched, it fell open on its own, pages flipping rapidly until they stopped on a passage near the end. Lysander moved to it immediately, Isolde following close behind. Together, they stared down at the illuminated text written in an ancient script that seemed to shift and reform into modern language as they looked at it. The bloodline prophecy, Lysander read aloud, his voice tight. When the blood of the first beloved returns, diluted by mortal generations but strengthened by time, a choice shall be given to the cursed one, bond in death, as was done before, or bond in life, through trials of trust, sacrifice, and transformation. Isolde's heart hammered. Bond in life? That's possible? I don't know. I've read this book cover to cover 100 times. This passage has never appeared before. His hand hovered over the text, not quite touching. It must require activation by the correct bloodline. What does it mean? Trials of trust, sacrifice, and transformation. Before Lysander could answer, the text shifted again. New words forming below the prophecy, the first trial. The cursed one must take freely given blood and freely given trust, without taking life. 3 times shall this occur before the bond may be tested. The second trial, the beloved must enter the darkness willingly, knowing what waits within, choosing the cursed one over the safety of light. The third trial, both must sacrifice what they hold most dear, the cursed one, their control, the beloved their mortality, and from this sacrifice transformation shall come. Isolde read the passage twice, her mind racing. It's a ritual, a way to form the bond without the curse. Or a way to ensure an even more painful death, Lysander said grimly. Prophecies are notoriously unreliable, but it's a chance. She turned to him, saw the conflict warring in his eyes. It's more than you had an hour ago. He stared at her for a long moment, and Isolde could see him weighing options, calculating risks, trying to find a way to protect her from the very opportunity she was offering. 3 times, he finally said. The first trial requires 3 blood exchanges without death. His jaw tightened. Do you understand what you'd be agreeing to? 3 times I would have to feed from you. 3 times you'd have to trust me not to lose control and drain you dry. Yes, Isolde said simply. This is insane, probably. You could die. I could die crossing the street. I could die from fever or accident or old age. At least this death would mean something. Lysander closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked exactly like what he was, a man who had lived too long, seen too much, lost too deeply. Why? He whispered. Why would you risk this for me? Because I see you, Isolde thought, but didn't say. Because you're more than the monster you believe yourself to be. Because in 3 days you've shown me more respect and honesty than anyone in my mortal life ever did. Instead, she said, because everyone deserves a second chance, even vampire kings. When he opened his eyes again, something had shifted in them. The black was receding, the frost-pale color returning, but there was a warmth there now that hadn't existed before. If we do this, he said carefully, we do it properly. No rushing, no taking chances. We'll space the exchanges out, give my control time to strengthen between each one. And at any point, if I feel the curse beginning to activate, you'll stop? I understand. He nodded slowly. Then, with infinite gentleness, he took her hand again and wrapped a clean handkerchief around the cut on her palm. That's 1, he murmured. 2 more to go. And despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the very real possibility that this would end in tragedy, Isolde felt something unexpected bloom in her chest. Hope. The palace felt different after the library. Isolde couldn't quite name what had changed. The stone walls were the same, the eternal twilight unchanged. But there was a new awareness in the air. She felt it in the way the vampire courtiers watched her now, no longer dismissive but wary, calculating. As if she'd transformed from irrelevant mortal to potential threat overnight. Word had spread that the king had drunk from her, that she'd survived, that he'd spent the next 3 nights locked in council with Thaddeus, poring over the Codex Sanguis and its newly revealed prophecy. Isolde stood at her window, no longer closed, no longer a barrier between her and the world below, and watched the gardens where Lysander had first appeared to her. 5 days had passed since the first blood exchange. 5 days of careful distance, formal conversations, Lysander maintaining control through sheer force of will. She could feel the pull growing stronger. Could see it in the way his hands clenched when she entered a room, the way his eyes tracked her every movement with an intensity that made her skin prickle. The second trial was coming. They both knew it. He's fighting it, a voice said behind her. Isolde turned to find Seraphine standing in the doorway, her amber eyes softer than usual. Fighting what? Everything. The bond, his feelings, the hope that maybe this time will be different. The vampire moved into the room with that eerie grace they all possessed. I've served him for nearly a century, and I've never seen him like this. He's terrified of hurting you. I know, but he wants you anyway. It wasn't a question. The blood has awakened something in him that's been dormant since Alara died. Every instinct is telling him to claim you, to complete the bond, to make you his in every way possible. Isolde's breath hitched. We're not yet. Seraphine's smile was knowing. But you will be. If the trials succeed, if the prophecy proves true, you'll be bound to him in ways that go far beyond blood. You'll be his queen, his mate, his eternal companion. Is that what you want? The question hung in the air. Isolde turned back to the window, watching moonlight paint the garden silver. Did she want that? To belong to a vampire king for eternity? To give up her mortality, her humanity, everything she'd ever known? I don't know, she admitted quietly. A week ago I was a shamed merchant's daughter waiting to be rejected by a monster. Now she gestured helplessly. I'm someone who might save him, or doom us both. I haven't had time to think about what comes after. Think about it, Seraphine advised, because the second trial requires you to enter the darkness willingly. To choose him over safety, you need to be certain before you take that step. After the vampire left, Isolde found herself unable to settle. She paced the chamber, her mind spinning with questions and doubts, and a dangerous, growing curiosity about the vampire king who had turned her entire world upside down. Finally, unable to bear the confinement any longer, she slipped out of her tower. The palace was a labyrinth at night, all winding corridors and shadowed alcoves. Isolde moved through it with careful steps, guided by instinct more than knowledge, until she found herself standing before a pair of massive doors carved with intricate patterns. The throne room. She pushed the doors open carefully, expecting to find it empty. Instead, she found Lysander sitting on the steps below his throne, his head in his hands, looking more human and vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. You shouldn't be here, he said without looking up. Neither should you. It's the middle of the night. I don't sleep much anymore. Not since. He trailed off, finally lifting his head to look at her. Not since you. Isolde's heart stuttered. She moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name, until she stood just a few feet away. Tell me about her, she said softly. About Alara. She expected him to refuse, to retreat into the cold formality he'd been maintaining. Instead, his expression softened with memory and grief. She laughed, he said simply, all the time over the smallest things. She found joy in everything: books, rain, the way candle flames danced. She made me remember what it was like to be human, to feel wonder instead of just existing. She sounds wonderful. She was. He paused, then added quietly, You're different from her, you know. She was light and laughter. You're steadier. Stronger. She would have been terrified of the trials. You face them with your eyes open. I'm terrified too, Isolde admitted. I'm just good at hiding it. Something flickered in his eyes: amusement, respect, something deeper. Come here. It wasn't a command, despite his tone. It was a request, an invitation. Isolde descended the steps until she stood directly in front of him. Even sitting, he was nearly at her eye level, and the proximity made her acutely aware of everything about him: the cold that radiated from his skin, the stillness of his chest, the way his eyes had begun to darken at the edges. I drank from you 5 days ago, he said softly. The pull should be fading, my control should be strengthening. But instead, his hand rose, hovering just beside her face, not quite touching. It's getting worse. Every moment you're near me, I want. He cut himself off, his jaw clenching. What do you want? Isolde whispered. Everything. The word came out raw. I want to taste you again. I want to know if your blood still sings the same song. I want to touch you, hold you, keep you close until I can't tell where I end and you begin. I want. He closed his eyes, fighting for control. I want to complete the bond and damn the consequences. Isolde's hand rose of its own accord, cupping his cheek. His skin was cold as marble, but it warmed slightly under her touch. Then do it, she breathed. The second exchange, we're ready. We're not. But he leaned into her palm anyway, his eyes opening to reveal pupils blown wide with hunger. I'm not. If I lose control this time, you won't. You can't know that. No, she agreed. But I trust you anyway. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. Trust. The first trial's requirement, what she was offering him, went beyond allowing him to drink her blood. It was faith in his control, his character, his fundamental humanity despite the monster he believed himself to be. Lysander stared at her for a long moment, searching her face for doubt, for fear, for any sign that she didn't truly understand what she was offering. He found none. Not here, he finally said, his voice rough. Not in the throne room where anyone might interrupt. If we do this, we do it somewhere safe. Somewhere I can stop if I need to. Where? His hand finally made contact, fingers tangling gently in her hair. My chambers, tomorrow night. Come to me there, willingly, knowing what I am and what I need. That will satisfy the second trial's requirement, entering the darkness by choice. Isolde nodded, not trusting her voice. Until then, Lysander murmured, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. Stay away from me, because my control is hanging by a thread, and if you stand this close much longer, I won't be able to resist tasting you right here, right now. The warning should have frightened her. Instead, it sent heat flooding through her veins, but she stepped back anyway, respecting his boundaries, giving him the space he needed. Tomorrow night, she confirmed. Then she turned and fled the throne room before the temptation to stay, to push, to see exactly how far his control could stretch, became too strong to resist. Behind her, Lysander remained on the steps, his hands clenched and his eyes completely black, fighting a war against instincts that had been dormant for 2 centuries, a war he was no longer certain he wanted to win. Lysander's chambers were nothing like Isolde expected. She'd imagined something dark, gothic, dripping with the weight of centuries. Instead, she found a space that was almost Spartan clean lines, minimal furniture, walls lined with books rather than weapons or trophies. A massive 4-poster bed dominated one corner, its curtains tied back to reveal dark silk sheets. Candles burned everywhere, casting warm light that seemed at odds with the vampire who lived here. He stood at the window, his back to her, tension radiating from every line of his body. Lock the door, he said quietly. Isolde's fingers trembled slightly as she obeyed. The soft click of the lock echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Thaddeus knows you're here. If I don't open that door within the hour, he'll break it down. Lysander finally turned to face her, and Isolde's breath caught at the intensity in his eyes. That's your safety measure, your escape route if I lose control. You won't. Stop saying that, he said. But there was no heat in it, only exhaustion. You have too much faith in me. Someone should. Isolde moved deeper into the room, noting the way he tracked her every step. You spent 2 centuries punishing yourself for a tragedy that wasn't your fault. Maybe it's time someone believed in you instead. It was my fault. I knew the risks. I chose to love her anyway. Love isn't a choice, Lysander. It's what you do with it that matters. He stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Then, with deliberate slowness, he began removing his jacket, a formal gesture, stripping away layers, preparing for what came next. The second exchange will be different from the first, he said, his voice carefully controlled. The first was brief, unplanned. This one needs to be deeper, longer. I need to take enough blood to trigger the bond's activation, then stop before it completes. It will be... He struggled for words. Intimate, more than you're prepared for. Then prepare me. Lysander's hands still on his shirt buttons. You don't understand what you're asking. Then show me. He crossed the room in 3 swift strides, stopping just inches away, close enough that Isolde had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from his skin. When I drink from you, he said softly, you'll feel everything. The pull of blood leaving your veins, the cold of my bite. But also... His hand rose to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. Pleasure. The vampire's kiss is designed to make prey willing, compliant. Your body will respond in ways you can't control. Do you understand? Isolde's pulse hammered against her throat. Yes. And you still want this? Yes. His eyes searched hers for a long moment. Then, seemingly satisfied with what he found, he stepped back and gestured to an ornate chair by the fireplace. Sit. Get comfortable. Once I start, I need you to stay very still. Isolde obeyed, settling into the chair's cushioned embrace. Lysander knelt before her, the vampire king, centuries old and impossibly powerful, lowering himself to his knees at her feet. Give me your hand, he murmured. She offered her left hand, the same one he'd drunk from before. The cut had healed to a thin pink line, barely visible. Lysander cradled her hand in both of his touch reverent. Then, maintaining eye contact, he brought her wrist to his lips. Remember, he said against her skin, if it becomes too much, tell me to stop. I'll hear you even through the blood haze. I will. He kissed her pulse point once, gently. Then his fangs descended, and he bit. The sensation was unlike anything Isolde had ever experienced. There was pain. Yes, a sharp sting that made her gasp, but almost immediately it transformed into something else. Warmth flooded through her veins, spreading from the bite point outward. Her muscles relaxed. Her head fell back against the chair. And beneath it all, a pulling sensation, rhythmic and hypnotic, as Lysander began to drink. She could feel his lips against her skin, his tongue working the wound, could hear the soft sounds he made, pleasure, satisfaction, something almost like relief. His eyes had closed, his entire body focused entirely on the act of feeding. Time became fluid. Seconds or minutes passed. Isolde couldn't tell. The warmth had become heat now, spreading through her entire body. Her breath came faster. Her free hand clenched in the chair's armrest, and still Lysander drank, lost in the taste of her, in the blood he'd denied himself for so long. Then, abruptly, his eyes snapped open. They were completely black, no trace of frost-pale blue remaining. And in them, Isolde saw recognition, the bond beginning to activate, the curse starting its deadly work. Lysander, she whispered. His name seemed to break whatever trance held him. With a sound that was half groan, half snarl, he wrenched himself away from her wrist, stumbling backward until he hit the wall. Blood stained his lips. His fangs were fully extended. His hands shook as he braced himself against the stone, fighting for control. Get out, he rasped. No. Isolde, I can feel it. The bond it's starting. Then let it start. She rose on unsteady legs, ignoring the dizziness from blood loss. Let it start, and then stop it. That's the trial. That's the test. You don't understand. Every instinct I have is screaming at me to finish this, to drain you dry and complete the bond. I can barely. She crossed to him, moving slowly, deliberately. Look at me. I can't. His voice cracked. If I look at you, if I see your pulse, smell your blood, look at me, Lysander. He raised his head, and the hunger in his eyes should have terrified her, should have sent her running for the locked door and Thaddeus's promised rescue. Instead, she cupped his face in both hands, forcing him to focus on her eyes rather than her throat. You are not the monster you believe yourself to be, she said firmly. You stopped. You felt the bond activating and you stopped. That's the proof. That's the answer we needed. His hands came up to cover hers, his grip almost painful. The Codex said 3 times. This was only the second. We don't know if I can maintain control through a third exchange. Then we'll find out. But not tonight. She could feel her strength fading. The blood loss finally catching up with her. Tonight you've proven you're stronger than the curse. Something in his expression cracked. Relief, wonder, disbelief all warring for dominance. Then, carefully, almost reverently, he pulled her into his arms. Isolde melted against his chest, feeling his cold seep into her warmth, grounding her. His hand cradled the back of her head, and she felt his lips brush her hair in something that might have been a kiss or a prayer. Thank you, he whispered, for trusting me, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Always, Isolde murmured against his shoulder. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped together in the candlelight. The second trial complete, and something new, something fragile and precious and dangerous growing between them. When Thaddeus finally unlocked the door an hour later, he found them still standing there, the vampire king holding a mortal girl as if she were the only thing keeping him tethered to whatever remained of his humanity. And perhaps, Thaddeus thought as he quietly withdrew, she was. The attack came 3 nights later. Isolde was in the library researching the third trial's requirements when the first scream echoed through the palace. She looked up from the codex just as Seraphine burst through the door, her amber eyes wide with urgency. "You need to come with me. Now." "What's happening?" "The Blood Council has arrived. They're demanding to see you." Ice flooded Isolde's veins. She'd heard whispers of the Blood Council, ancient vampires who enforced the old laws, who viewed mortals as nothing more than livestock. Lysander had mentioned them once, his voice tight with disgust. "Why do they want to see me?" "Because you're alive." Seraphine grabbed her arm, pulling her toward a hidden passage behind one of the bookcases. "Because the king has drunk from you twice and you haven't died or been turned. Because you're breaking rules that have existed for millennia and they want it stopped." They emerged in a dark corridor, and Isolde could hear raised voices coming from the throne room. Lysander's voice, cold and commanding. And another voice, ancient and cruel. "Cannot allow this abomination to continue. The blood bond is sacred. If you cannot control yourself around this mortal, then we will remove the temptation. You will not touch her." Lysander's words were sharp as blades. "She is under my protection." "Your protection means nothing, boy. We were ancient when you were still mortal. We remember the old ways, before your kind grew soft with human sympathies." Seraphine pushed open a small door, and suddenly Isolde could see into the throne room. A group of vampires stood before Lysander, 7 of them, all radiating power that made the air itself feel heavy. They wore robes the color of dried blood, and their eyes were cold, assessing, predatory. "The prophecy," Lysander began. "Is a myth," the lead vampire interrupted. His name, Isolde remembered, was Corvus, and he was rumored to be over 1,000 years old, a story told to comfort those foolish enough to love mortals. "There is no way to break the blood bond curse. There is only death or transformation, and this girl is too weak for the latter." "You don't know that." "We know that you're risking exposure. Risking everything our kind has built. One dead mortal girl is a tragedy. A vampire king obsessed with breaking unbreakable curses, willing to defy the council for a human?" Corvus's smile was cruel. "That's a revolution, and we cannot allow it." Lysander's power filled the room, making the very stones tremble. "You will not harm her. Then turn her. Complete the transformation and be done with this farce." "She's not ready. She'll never be ready. No mortal ever is." Corvus took a step forward. "You have a choice, Lysander. Turn her now, under our supervision, ensuring she survives the process. Or refuse, and we will eliminate the problem ourselves." The silence that followed was terrible. Isolde's hands clenched. They were discussing her life, her death, her transformation as if she were a chess piece rather than a person. Rage and fear warred in her chest. Then Lysander spoke, his voice colder than she'd ever heard it. "If you touch her, I will destroy you all." Corvus laughed a sound like breaking glass. "You're powerful, boy, but you're not that powerful. There are 7 of us, ancient, experienced, and unbound by the sentimental weaknesses that plague you. You would lose. Perhaps, but I would take at least 3 of you with me. Are you willing to pay that price?" The threat hung in the air. Isolde could see the calculation in Corvus's eyes, weighing options, measuring risks. "This isn't over," the ancient vampire finally said. "We'll give you 1 more week. Complete the 3rd trial. Prove the prophecy is real, but if you fail, if this mortal dies or you lose control." His smile was vicious. "We'll ensure you never endanger our kind with your foolish hope again." They swept from the throne room like a dark tide, leaving Lysander standing alone in the candlelight, his hands clenched and his shoulders rigid with fury. Isolde pushed through the hidden door before Seraphine could stop her. "That was incredibly stupid," the vampire hissed. But Isolde was already descending the steps toward Lysander. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and the expression on his face nearly stopped her in her tracks. It was raw, devastated. furious. You shouldn't have heard that, but I did. She crossed to him, closing the distance between them. They want to kill me. They won't get the chance. Lysander, I meant what I said. His eyes met hers, frost-pale and blazing with an intensity that stole her breath. I will destroy anyone who tries to harm you. Council member or not, ancient or not. I don't care. You can't fight them all. Watch me. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made something warm unfurl in Isolde's chest, but beneath it was fear for him, fear of what this defiance might cost. There's another option, she said carefully. If you're about to suggest I turn you to satisfy the council, don't. The transformation is brutal. It requires the mortal to be at peak strength, with the will to survive agony that would break most minds. After 2 blood exchanges, you're weaker. The attempt would likely kill you. Then what do we do? Lysander was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. Then he seemed to make a decision. The 3rd trial, we complete it now. Now, but we haven't. The Codex says the 3rd trial requires both parties to sacrifice what they hold most dear. For me, it's control. I have to let go completely, trust the bond to form without fighting it. And for you. He paused, his expression softening. For you, it's mortality, your human life, your chance at a normal existence. I don't understand. The 3rd trial isn't just another blood exchange, Isolde. It's a transformation, a bonding. If it works, if the prophecy is true, you'll become something new. Not fully vampire, not fully mortal. Something in between. Immortal but alive, tied to me through blood and choice. Isolde's breath caught. And if it doesn't work, then you'll die. And so will I. His hand rose to cup her face, his touch achingly gentle. Because if you die because of me, I won't survive it. Not again. The weight of his words settled over her like a shroud. This was it. The final trial. The moment where they'd either break the curse that had haunted him for 2 centuries, or die trying. When? She whispered. Tomorrow night. The blood moon rises, then the Codex specified the 3rd trial should occur under its light. It will give us the best chance of survival. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. But Isolde, you need to be certain. Once we start, there's no going back. You'll either become mine forever, or I'm certain. The words came out stronger than she felt, but they were true. She was certain that she wanted this, wanted him, wanted a chance at forever, even if it meant risking everything. Lysander's eyes searched hers, and whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him. Then tomorrow, he said softly, we end this, one way or another. He pulled her into his arms, and Isolde melted against his chest, feeling the stillness where a heartbeat should be. Tomorrow, they would face the final trial. Tomorrow, they would either break an ancient curse or become its latest victims. But tonight, in the candlelit throne room with the threat of the council hanging over them, they simply held each other. And for this moment, it was enough. The blood moon rose like a wound in the sky. Isolde stood in Lysander's private garden, a secret place hidden deep within the palace grounds, where ancient roses bloomed black and red beneath starlight. The moon hung low and crimson overhead, casting everything in shades of shadow and blood. She wore a simple white gown, chosen for its symbolism, white for mortality, for the human life she was about to surrender. Her hair hung loose down her back, and her feet were bare against the cool grass. Lysander approached from the shadows, and Isolde's breath caught. He had shed every marker of kingship, no crown, no formal attire, nothing but simple black clothing that somehow made him look even more dangerous, more beautiful. His hair fell loose around his face, and his eyes were already darkening at the edges, responding to her proximity and the moon's pull. "Last chance," he said softly. "We can still stop this. I can send you away, somewhere the council can't find you. You'd be free." "I don't want freedom," Isolde said. "I want you." The words hung between them, honest and raw. Not a declaration of love, they hadn't known each other long enough for that, but a declaration of choice, of willing sacrifice. Lysander closed his eyes briefly. something like pain crossing his features. Then he opened them and extended his hand. "Come then, let's break a curse." She took his hand, letting him lead her to the center of the garden, where a circle had been drawn in salt and ash. Ancient symbols marked the perimeter: protection, transformation, binding. The codex lay open on a stone pedestal, its pages glowing faintly in the moonlight. "The ritual requires blood from both of us," Lysander explained, his voice steady despite the tension radiating from him. "Mixed in this chalice, under the blood moon, then I drink from you one final time and you drink from me. The exchange must be equal life for life, blood for blood. If the prophecy is true, the bond will form without the curse. You'll transform into something new. And if it's not true, then the curse will activate and I'll drain you before I can stop myself. You'll die, and I'll follow shortly after." His hand tightened on hers. "I won't survive losing you, Isolde. I need you to understand that." "I do." She squeezed his hand back. "I trust you. I trust this. Let's begin." He released her hand to pick up a ceremonial blade from the pedestal. The metal gleamed red in the moonlight. "Your hand first," he murmured. Isolde offered her palm without hesitation. The blade was sharp, cold. Blood welled up immediately, bright and vital. Lysander positioned her hand over the chalice, letting several drops fall into the silver cup. Then he raised the blade to his own palm and cut deeply. His blood was darker than hers, thick and slow-moving. It dripped into the chalice, mixing with hers, and the moment the two bloods touched, the liquid began to glow with an eerie silver light. "It's working," Isolde breathed. "It's beginning," Lysander corrected. He set down the blade and picked up the chalice with both hands. "Drink first. You need my blood in your system before I can complete the exchange." He offered her the cup, and Isolde took it with trembling hands. The mixed blood inside swirled like living smoke, silver and crimson dancing together. She raised it to her lips and drank. The taste was copper and ice, and something darker power perhaps, or ancient magic. It burned going down, but not unpleasantly, more like the burn of strong wine, settling into her stomach with growing warmth. The garden began to blur at the edges. She swayed slightly, and Lysander's hands came up to steady her. "Easy," he murmured. "Let it work through you. Don't fight it." The warmth was spreading now, racing through her veins like wildfire. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Her skin felt too tight, and beneath it all, she could feel something fundamental shifting, changing, rewriting itself at the most basic level. "Now you," she managed, her voice strange in her own ears. Lysander took the chalice from her shaking hands and drank the remainder without hesitation. His eyes immediately went completely black, his fangs fully extending. "Isolde," he rasped, "the final exchange. Are you ready?" She nodded, unable to speak. He pulled her close, one arm wrapping around her waist to support her weight, the other hand tangling in her hair. Then, with aching gentleness, he tilted her head to expose her throat. "I love you," he whispered against her skin. "I should have said it before, but I do. I love you." Then his fangs sank into her throat. The sensation was overwhelming, pain and pleasure and something beyond both. Isolde gasped, her hands clutching at his shoulders as he began to drink. She could feel her blood leaving her body in rhythmic pulls, could feel his power flowing in to replace it. The bond stretched between them, visible now even with her eyes closed, a silver thread connecting heart to heart, soul to soul. And beneath it, she felt the curse trying to activate, felt it reaching for her life force, trying to drain her dry. But something was different this time. The mixed blood in her veins, his blood was fighting back, pushing against the curse, creating a barrier. And as Lysander drank, she felt his sacrifice too, felt him letting go of the control he'd maintained for centuries, surrendering to the bond completely, trusting it not to destroy them both. The thread between them blazed brighter, brighter, until it was nearly blinding. Then, with a sensation like breaking through a surface, something snapped into place. The curse shattered. Isolde felt the ancient magic that had bound Lysander for 2 centuries crack and crumble like old stone, felt the bond reform in its wake, clean and true and unbreakable. Lysander made a sound against her throat, surprise, relief, wonder, and pulled back. His fangs withdrew carefully, and he stared at her with eyes that were slowly returning to their frost-pale color. "It worked," he breathed. "The curse, it's gone. I can feel the bond, but it's different. It's not pulling your life away. He struggled for words. It's balanced, equal, a true bond, not a parasitic one." Isolde raised a shaking hand to her throat. The bite marks were already healing, knitting together faster than any mortal wound should. "What am I?" she whispered. "Something new." Lysander's hand covered hers, and she realized his skin didn't feel cold anymore. Or rather, hers felt colder now, not human cold, but something closer to his temperature, something the world has never seen, not vampire, not mortal, something in between. He pulled her close again, crushing her against his chest, and Isolde wrapped her arms around him, holding him just as tightly. "We did it," she said, wonder filling her voice. "We actually did it." "You did it," Lysander corrected. "Your blood, your sacrifice, your faith when I had none." He pulled back enough to cup her face in both hands. "You saved me, Isolde. In every way a person can be saved." Then finally, after all the blood exchanges and trials and desperate restraint, he kissed her. It was gentle, at first a soft press of lips, tentative and questioning. But when Isolde responded, deepening the kiss, he surrendered to it completely. His arms tightened around her, his hand tangled in her hair, and between them the bond blazed with silver light, cementing them together for eternity. When they finally broke apart, both breathless despite neither needing air, Lysander rested his forehead against hers. "The council," she started, "can burn for all I care. You're immortal now. They can't kill you, can't threaten you, and if they try—" His smile was fierce, proud, protective. "They'll learn exactly what a vampire king is capable of when someone threatens his queen." Queen. The word settled over Isolde like a mantle. "I'm not ready to be a queen." "Good, because I need you to be more than that. I need you to be my partner, my equal, my—" He paused, searching for the right word. "My salvation." Above them, the blood moon began to fade, its crimson light softening to silver. The ritual was complete. The curse was broken, and 2 souls that should never have met, should never have bonded, had found a way to rewrite their own destiny. The council returned at dawn. Isolde stood beside Lysander in the throne room, feeling the weight of their combined stares. 7 ancient vampires, radiating disapproval and thinly veiled hostility, faced a king who had just shattered their most fundamental law. Impossible. Corvus breathed, his ancient eyes fixed on Isolde. She's still alive, still breathing, but also— He inhaled deeply. Changed, her scent is different. Neither mortal nor vampire. The prophecy was real, Lysander said, his voice carrying absolute authority. The blood bond curse is broken. Isolde has transformed into something new, an immortal partner, not a dying victim. We have proven it can be done. One success does not invalidate centuries of tragedy, another council member said. The circumstances were unique, the bloodline connection, the specific wording of the prophecy. The circumstances can be replicated, Isolde interrupted, surprised by the strength in her own voice. She could feel the bond humming between her and Lysander, feeding her confidence, lending her his power. If we could break the curse, others can too. We just need to understand the mechanism, study the transformation. Absolutely not. Corvus cut in sharply. You want to give hope to vampires who have already accepted their isolation? To suggest they can bond with mortals without death? It would destabilize everything. Good, Lysander said coldly. Your laws are built on fear and loneliness. They deserve to be destabilized. The tension in the room was suffocating. Isolde could see the calculation in the council members' eyes. They wanted to attack, to eliminate this threat to their order, but they were also afraid. Afraid of Lysander's power. Afraid of what Isolde had become. Afraid of the implications if word of this transformation spread. "We could kill you both," Corvus said finally. "Claim you broke covenant law. That would end this." "You could try," Lysander agreed. "But I'm stronger now than I was 3 days ago. The bond doesn't just protect Isolde, amplifies us both. And if you attack my queen..." His smile was sharp as broken glass. "Well, I've been alive for 4 centuries, Corvus. I've learned a great many ways to destroy ancient vampires." The threat hung in the air like a blade. Then Thaddeus stepped forward from his position by the wall. "May I suggest an alternative?" All eyes turned to the Chancellor. "The Council fears instability," Thaddeus continued. "King Lysander desires the freedom to research this transformation, to potentially help others achieve what he and Lady Isolde have accomplished. Perhaps there's a compromise." "What compromise?" Corvus demanded. "Grant them 1 decade, 10 years to study the bond, to document the process, to determine if the transformation is truly replicable. In exchange, they agree to keep their research private, known only to the Council. At the end of 10 years, we reconvene. If their findings prove stable and safe, we consider revising the old laws. If not..." Thaddeus spread his hands. "Then we accept that this was a unique circumstance, never to be repeated." Isolde glanced at Lysander, seeing her own surprise mirrored in his eyes. It was reasonable, more reasonable than she'd expected from the ancient vampires who'd threatened her life days ago. Corvus and the other council members withdrew to the far end of the throne room, their voices too low for even vampire hearing to catch as they debated. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, they returned. 10 years, Corvus said, but with conditions. You do not share your findings with anyone outside this room. You do not encourage other vampires to attempt bonding. And his gaze hardened. If Lady Isolde's transformation proves unstable, if she becomes a threat to our secrecy or our kind, we reserve the right to eliminate that threat. Lysander's power surged, making the candles flicker. No! Then there's no deal. Wait. Isolde placed a hand on Lysander's arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. I agree to the terms. Isolde. I agree, she repeated firmly. 10 years is more than enough time to prove I'm stable, and if, somehow, I do become a threat to vampire kind... She met Corvus's eyes steadily, then elimination would be justified. She could feel Lysander's fury through the bond, but she also felt something else, his reluctant understanding. This was the best deal they were going to get, the only way to move forward without all-out war. Fine, Lysander bit out. We accept your terms. 10 years. But after that, if our research proves sound, the old laws change. No more forcing vampires to live in isolation. No more treating the blood bond as an automatic death sentence. Corvus studied them both for a long moment. Then, with obvious reluctance, he inclined his head in the barest suggestion of a bow. 10 years, he agreed. We will return then to assess your findings. The council swept from the throne room as dramatically as they'd entered, leaving Isolde and Lysander alone with Thaddeus. The moment they were gone, Lysander pulled Isolde into his arms, holding her tight enough to steal her breath. Never do that again, he said into her hair. Never offer yourself as a potential target. I had to. It was the only way. I don't care. I won't lose you. You won't. She pulled back enough to cup his face. We have 10 years to prove I'm stable. To document everything about the transformation. To build a case strong enough that the council has to listen. And if they don't? Then we fight, but at least we'll have tried. She smiled, feeling the bond pulse with warmth between them. Besides, you're forgetting something. What? I'm immortal now. A little thing like the Blood Council doesn't scare me anymore. Despite everything, Lysander laughed a real laugh, full and genuine. He pressed his forehead to hers and Isolde felt his relief flooding through the bond. What do we do now? she asked softly. Now, Lysander's smile was slow, warm, filled with possibilities. Now we live, we research, we build the life we should have had 2 centuries ago. We prove to everyone, council, court, ourselves, that breaking the curse wasn't just possible. It was the beginning of something better. Together, always together. He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and Isolde surrendered to it completely. The throne room faded away. The weight of the council's conditions, the decade of research ahead, the uncertainty of their future, all of it, dissolved into the simple, perfect truth of the bond between them. They had survived the trials, broken the curse, defied death and ancient law to forge something new. And now, finally, they could begin. 3 months after the blood moon, Isolde stood in the library, where everything had begun. Watching snow fall softly outside the windows, winter had come to the vampire kingdom, the first winter of her new existence. She could feel the cold now without being bothered by it, could stand barefoot in the snow and find it merely interesting rather than painful. Her senses had sharpened too. She could hear conversations from 3 floors away, could smell the specific blend of tea Seraphine was preparing in the kitchen, could see individual snowflakes with perfect clarity. She was still learning what she'd become, still discovering new abilities and limitations, but she was alive, and more than that, she was happy. Working late again? Lysander's voice came from the doorway, warm with affection. Isolde turned to find him leaning against the frame, watching her with an expression that still made her heart skip beats. Just reviewing my notes, she said, gesturing to the paper spread across the table. I want to have everything documented properly before we test the next phase. Over the past months, they'd made significant progress. Isolde's transformation had remained stable, no reversion to mortality, no vampire bloodlust, no signs of the curse reactivating. She existed in a perfect balance between human and vampire, retaining the best qualities of both. But more importantly, they'd discovered something crucial. Her blood now contained antibodies to the curse. If harvested carefully and mixed with specific herbs documented in the codex, it could potentially prevent the curse from forming in the first place. It wasn't a cure for vampires already cursed, but it was a prevention, a way forward for those who wanted to bond without risking death. You've done enough for tonight, Lysander said, crossing to her and pulling her gently away from the table. Come, there's something I want to show you. He led her through the palace, upstairs and down corridors she didn't recognize, until they emerged onto a balcony she'd never seen before. It overlooked the entire kingdom, the forests and mountains, the villages that dotted the landscape, all covered in pristine snow that gleamed in the moonlight. It's beautiful, Isolde breathed. This was Alara's favorite place, Lysander said softly. She used to come here when she needed to think. After she died, I locked the door. I couldn't bear to see it without her. Isolde's hand found his, squeezing gently. What changed? You. He turned to face her, his expression open in a way it never had been before the bond. You taught me that grief doesn't mean forgetting, that honoring the past doesn't require being imprisoned by it. I can remember Alara with love, remember what we had, and still build something new with you. Tears pricked Isolde's eyes, happy tears this time. She'd be glad you found happiness again. I think she would. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Isolde's breath caught. I have something for you. It's not a marriage proposal. We're already bound more deeply than any mortal marriage could achieve, but I wanted you to have this anyway. He opened the box to reveal a ring, not the elaborate jeweled thing she might have expected, but something simpler, a silver band engraved with symbols from the codex, the same symbols that had marked their bonding circle. It's beautiful. It's a promise, Lysander said, a reminder that we chose this, chose each other, not because of fate or prophecy or curse, but because we wanted to, because you saw a broken vampire king and decided he was worth saving, because I saw a shamed girl with more courage than anyone I'd ever met and couldn't let her go. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. I love you, Isolde said, the words coming easily now. I don't think I've said it enough, but I do. I love you. I know. Lysander pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they both looked out over the snow-covered kingdom. I feel it every moment through the bond. Your love, your strength, your ridiculous optimism that we can change the world. We already have changed it. One curse broken, more to follow. Always so confident. Someone has to be. She leaned back against his chest, feeling safe and whole and perfectly content. Besides, we have 9.5 years left to prove our case. That's plenty of time. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching snow fall and the moon track its path across the sky. Somewhere in the palace below, life continued. Thaddeus managing kingdom business, Seraphine and Mira gossiping in the kitchens, courtiers navigating the new reality of having a transformed queen. "Do you ever regret it?" Lysander asked quietly. "Giving up your mortality? Your chance at a normal human life?" "Never." Isolde turned in his arms to face him properly. "What kind of life would that have been? Married to some merchant's son who thought I was a thief? Growing old in a village that shamed me? This." She gestured around them, at the kingdom, at him. "This is better than anything I could have imagined. Even the parts where ancient vampires threaten to kill you? Especially those parts. Makes life interesting." He laughed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You're incredible. You know that?" "I'm learning." She rose on her toes to kiss him properly, and felt the bond surge with warmth between them. "Now come on, we should get back. I want to run those antibody tests before sunrise, and you promised to help." "I promised no such thing." "You implied it, with your eyes. That's not how implications work." But he followed her anyway, back through the palace toward the laboratory they'd set up, bickering good-naturedly about scientific methodology and whether vampires could actually make implications with their eyes. Years later, when historians would write about the breaking of the blood curse, they would focus on the dramatic moments, the trials, the blood moon, the confrontation with the council. They would paint it as an epic tale of forbidden love and ancient magic. But the truth was simpler and more profound. It was about two broken people finding each other in darkness, about choosing to trust when trust seemed impossible, about believing that even the most ancient curses could be broken with enough courage and sacrifice and love. The vampire king had rejected all brides until a shamed girl awakened his blood. But in the end, it wasn't about awakening or blood or even prophecy. It was about two souls who saw each other's scars and chose to heal together. And that, perhaps, was the greatest magic of all. The end.